Ready? Uh, well, first, a self-introduction. I'm Zhang. I am a software developer with 2.5 years of experience. And next week, I'll be starting a new position at Ticketmaster as senior software engineer. I think one thing really important to remember is that your career is a marathon and not a sprint. And just because feel a little bit, held back now doesn't mean you'll be like this forever. And I really felt that like this year, especially after COVID. Today, mostly, I will give a brief overview of what to do and what you should expect throughout the whole process. I wouldn't go too in depth with everything because everything deserves like an hour presentation on its own. And I will tell you about some personal success I have over the years and some experiences. Yeah. So today I'm gonna go over like my work history, like how much money I made at like each point. I know there's also stigma around talking about how much money you make, but I personally don't believe that. And I think it's very important to know how much you're worth on the market. And then I will go over each of my resumes and show you how my resumes has evolved over the years and all the stuff I've learned about resume writing. And after that, I'll talk about my strategies for interviews. And I will go into more details about one of my more recent interview at Loblaws, where I personally think I've had the best interview I've ever done. And of course, in the end, there will be a Q&A session. And if anyone has questions after the presentation, you can feel free to reach out to me on WeChat and LinkedIn, and I'll be more than glad to answer them. So starting out, like I probably started at a lower point than most of you. Most of you have bachelors. I don't even have a bachelor's degree. I don't even have a degree. I have a diploma in computer programming analysis, and it's kind of like comp sci, but more watered down, more practical. And when I graduated high school, I didn't have like the best experience in high school, so I didn't even qualify to go after a degree. So I picked this program at the local college, at Seneca College. And the main reason I picked this program is because like there was a good pathway towards a degree if I wanted to pursue one. And also they had a very good co-op placement program. So there was like a smaller pool of people for me to compete with in order to get a co-op position. Yeah. And yeah, like the program itself was very easy. And during the program, I got a position at HOOP, Healthcare Augmented Pension Plan. It's like, it's a very big pension plan downtown. And I did relatively well there. I actually had a verbal return offer, which never materialized. I think, I got having gotten this co-op position really gave myself a lot of confidence. And during this co-op program, I actually had a little side project going, which will be important later. So yeah. So after I graduated, I actually graduated the diploma program. I had a very hard time finding a job. Like I'm not sure what it was. I think it was a mix of ego and having a diploma, honestly. Because when I was at Hoop, I did relatively well. So, I got a verbal return offer. So like, that never materialized, right? So at the same time, I also met someone on my side project, which eventually led me to work part-time at Fintelex. So, I did a couple months there before I graduated. So I did okay. And so my boss will at the time offer me a job. So, I had a very big ego, like coming out of school. It's like, I feel I can get into Amazon. I feel like I could get into like a good company, but, nothing. I sent out hundreds of resumes. I barely got a reply even for like more average companies, average positions. And like I didn't even get a reply for a junior position, So, but on the bright side, I had this fallback, right, which was this part-time position I had. So I just turned it into a full-time position. When I was at Hoop, when I was a co-op, they were paying me $25 an hour at the time, and that was like the market rate for interns at the time. It was pretty good, I would say. Anyway, so I went to Fintelex, and Fintelex is probably gonna make up the bulk of this slide. Fintelex was a very bittersweet workplace for me because it's a contractor company. So like a little bit of Fintelex, right? Fintelex they focus on DevOps and blockchain and the mostly contractor company. So they get contracts from clients and they try to basically materialize clients' ideas. So I had a chance to work on a lot of projects, but so at the same time, a lot of those projects never really got past the first stage, got past MVP. So for those who don't know, MVP is minimum viable products. And, I pour a lot of heart and soul into what I do. And, it's very sad to see those projects just die off. But working here, is probably a blessing in disguise. Like at the time, I wasn't very happy, but looking back, it was always a blessing in disguise because being at a small company and working on frequent iterations of new products really allowed me to hone my skill. So I'm a MERN stack developer. So I pretty much specialize in React and Node.js and JavaScript. So I took those skills and I just kept building new projects with them. And eventually, when I started here, I was making $25 again. That's partially why I didn't really want to go back here in the beginning because there wasn't a lot of money. And eventually I was able to get salary bump to $35 an hour, but still that was still kind of on on the low side for a new grad, I would say at the time. Anyway, so, through different projects, I learned different skills like project management because it's a small company of like 10 people. You kind of have to manage the projects by yourself, I had people who work with me, work under me. That means, I had the chance to mentor people, and mentoring people is always a very good way to further your technical skills because, you have to know subject enough to explain it. You have to have you have to be able to communicate concepts and code very clearly in language, which is also a very important interview skill. And, I would also learn how to interact with clients. And one of the more, I also had a lot of responsibilities besides being a developer. I was responsible for interviews, client interactions, etc. So it really helped me grow as a developer in all kinds of directions. But during my time here, every once in a while, and obviously, as you can see from the timeline, large part of my tenure here was during COVID. So, I had a hard time finding a new job. Even though, when I was working, I wasn't exactly happy. At the same time, I took it and I turned it into the best I could, right? Like what this job lacked in monetary value gave me my personal, is replaced with personal growth. You know, I had a lot of freedom in what technologies I want to try, like how I want to try to architect things differently. And, you know, my time here, I got to work on some of probably the coolest projects ever. Like, can you imagine having CSGO running, like being part of your job? It's like, it's unreal, right? It's like, it's not something you would see in like organizations of any scale, but yeah, unless you work in game dev or something, right? Yeah, but anyway, so I worked here for a year and 3 months, and near the end, you know, every once in a while I applied a little bit, and you know, I refined my resume, and eventually I got a job offer at Atonics, which develops healthcare apps. So I just left, and it's been a much less stressful job. Like my time at Fintelex was good. I met good people, but the job itself was too stressful. You know, Atonics, I was happy, but there's not much to talk about. I did basically the same things as I did at Fintelex, but focused on one product. I built it on one product. And about a month ago, I got a message from a friend. I got a referral from a friend to have interview at Ticketmaster. And I was like, wouldn't hurt to try. So I went and I got the job. So next week, I'll be starting as senior software engineer at Ticketmaster. And salary. My salary when I was, my salary currently at Atonics is $70,000 a year. So it's a little bit more than the $35 an hour that I was eventually paid at Fintelex. $35 an hour is like $68,000 a year, but $68,000 a year in cash, it didn't really have benefits. So like there's a concept called total compensation, where benefits also factors into like your whole package, right? Sometimes it's worth up to 30% of the salary, depending on how good they are. Yeah, and obviously I left my current job, even though I'm very happy at Atonics. My skills has been rather stagnant because things are very slow. Like my time at Fintelex gave me the most growth because I was working on different projects. I was like pushing like my personal limits. So yeah, I'm back in the game. So also Ticketmaster pays a lot more. Ticketmaster pays 120K Canadian a year for a senior developer. But anyways, so now let me show you some. So let me just talk about where you would find jobs in the beginning. So obviously you would go on job sites, you know, LinkedIn, Indeed, right? And then one thing when I was new to job hunting that I didn't realize is that you could connect with recruiters, and there's like different types of recruiters. So there's internal and corporate recruiters. So they're basically the HR department of the company. You can actually connect to them directly on LinkedIn and send them like your credentials or resume and see if they have any openings for you. You could just go LinkedIn search AWS recruiter, and they would like very often they would have staffing hiring. And there's also external recruiters, which are basically they work off of commission. So they're usually working in your interests rather than internal recruiters. And this external recruiter is one where my friend referred me to Ticketmaster. And external recruiters are usually the nicest people you'll ever meet. Especially this, my experience with Ticketmaster is that they hold your hand every step of the way. Like before interview, they give you information you need to prepare for the interview, and they would like get in touch with you after to see how it went, and etc. And then there's also like a special kind of recruiter, like called contract recruiters. They're kind of like they are kind of like a contract company, basically. They recruit you for their contract company. Personally, I usually steer away from the lower ones if you're a new grad, because they're usually very shady. They lock you into like 2-year deals for little to no money, and it's never a good idea. And also, I just want to throw a special mention to like there's like special recruiter organizations. There are actually nonprofit recruiter organizations like Invest Ottawa. So for those of you who doesn't mind moving to Ottawa, you could probably reach out to them on LinkedIn and see if they have any openings for you, because their incentive is to promote economic growth within Ottawa, and they have connection with our startups. They provide office space for startups. They're basically like the HR department. They're personally like the internal recruiters for startups in Ottawa. So reach out to them to see if they have any good openings for you. And obviously, there are other ways to find jobs, like there's referrals. And for those of you who don't know, there's like school career fairs where like obviously COVID, they're not hosting them during COVID, but they will have booths set up in a building, and you can walk up to them and hand them a resume. And yeah, so now I will talk about some resume theory. These are some lessons I learned over the years as a job seeker. So first, you should always have a well-prepared, well-formatted resume. When I first started being an interviewer, I was very surprised to see the amount of badly formatted resumes and badly worded resumes. I really thought they didn't exist, but apparently they do. And as someone who is reviewing like tens of resumes a day, it gets very tiring. So if I see the bad one, you bet I'm gonna just not look at it, right? And also another thing I learned over the years, there's something as an interviewee, is that there's something called an applicant tracking system. So this is a system where they have a machine who tries to automatically understand your resume and make it searchable by recruiters. That's why sometimes this is important, is because sometimes when we use fancy formats, I'll show you a little bit later, but sometimes when we use fancy formats, it doesn't work very well with the system. So you will get less hits when you're entering into a system by a recruiter. And obviously you have keywords to help this tracking system, or just whoever is reading your resume in general. You can put the important keywords on that, like you got to put React, REST, etc., like anything to catch the eye. And also one problem I've noticed amongst my peers is that they always think the resume has to be perfect on the first try. And you should know that never happens. And I think you should always treat resume writing like development, like iterative development. It evolves over time, right? And you should, of course, have a good base resume. But when you go and look at different job descriptions, sometimes one frequent question people always ask is like, what do I put on my resumes? It's simple. You just go look at the job description and you put like those concepts translate that onto your resume, right? So hence change, iterate, and update while we apply. Also, if you have a lot of time in your hands, you should A/B test your resume. So basically, you should try different copies of your resume. Like try changing the wording, like how you word things, and see like which version gets more hits. And not only should you change the wording, but you should also just try different templates. This goes back to applicant tracking system and in general, just maybe, and because templates are a lot of times a subjective thing, right? But maybe this template doesn't work well as well. So you could try different templates and see if it works with applicant tracking system. And also you should know whatever you put in your resume. Like too many times have I seen people, I ask them about something on their resume, they go and then they can't really answer. And also there's a tool that I find very useful in help writing resume. when I was writing my resume is that Microsoft Resume Helper. It's a utility built into Microsoft Word. So when you go pick a resume template, it'll pop up on the side and it will show you how people write their job description on LinkedIn. And you can use those sentences as a basic reference frame for your skills. And also, I would like to recommend my personal favorite resume builder, Credo.io. It's completely free. Like the free tier is super usable. Like the pay tier is so hard to buy. I don't even think the pay tier needs to exist. Because beautiful resumes. However, one downside is that I don't think their templates work very well with applicant tracking system. But anyways, now let me show you some of my resumes to like emphasize these points, right? So this is my first resume. Like this is what I used to apply to Hoop. Like at the time, I didn't really have any job experience, right? So one thing I did is that I filled it with projects. So only one of these projects I did is I did after college, during college. The rest of these are just stuff I wrote when I was in high school. I took a high school comp sci class, so I just threw these on here, right? And as you notice, these, like I put all sentences on here because there's not a lot to write about. So it kind of just fluffs out the space here a bit. And also you see I put language down here, it also just adds a little bit of fluff. All right, so it doesn't make it not as empty because if I didn't have these, it would look too empty. Yeah. And this is like, I personally really like this template. It's very appealing to the eye. And also I think finding your first job, sometimes I think after your first job, like cover letter doesn't matter as much, but I think for your first job, it's a lot more important because everyone is on the same playing field. So I think writing a good cover letter would really give you a leg up to get you past the resume stage onto the interview stage, right? So like, for example, like for my cover letter, I wrote one paragraph basically dedicated to Hoop. I went to their presentation and I listened, and then I took some keywords down. I just wrote it into the first paragraph. And the other stuff is a little bit more cookie cutter boilerplate and generic because just write some stuff to highlight your skills. And yeah, these are soft skills. These are hard skills under that. And then the last paragraph, just tell myself somewhere to show that I have initiative. And yeah. So, and another thing you could put on your resume is like related coursework. I think I had a lot of projects I could put, so I didn't put any coursework. But you could put some coursework on here to fluff it up a bit. But yeah, like a lot of this fluff is like just straight up removing my later resumes. Anyways, this is my next resume, and you guys might notice that it looks a lot different and it's a lot more crowded, it's a lot more busy. And I admit, this resume looks a lot more uglier than the other one. And it's 2 pages. And I will not go into the argument of having 1-page or 2-page resume, but this resume, so between the last resume and this one, this is the resume that got me my job at Atonics. So I've gone through like 10, 20 iterations. Like iteration doesn't have a big change, but I've tried different versions. And for this resume, I also have a version that uses the same template, which also looks like this, except it's 2 pages. But this resume actually got me more interviews than the other one, because I think the advantages of having this Word resume is that it worked very well with the applicant tracking system. So when I was entered into systems of like different recruiters, when I sent this to them, I was getting more hits. So I was getting more interview requests or just people who wanted to talk to me in general. but by this point I have enough job experience. So instead of all that fluff, you know, I put my co-op experience, I wrote my like just experience at Atonics, and I had this whole section on like just all the stuff I've worked on. In hindsight, it's probably not as good, but at the same time, I rationalized it as having more talking points, because resume is more than just about getting yourself past the HR department and getting an interview. It's also serves as like a talking point during your interview, right? So, yeah. Also, this resume has a horrible like space issue that I really should have fixed. I don't even know how this resume got past anything, to be honest. But I'm like, look at all this empty space. Like, it's just bad, you know. Like this is like an example of resume you should not be doing. And it was but I think, yeah, but how we're getting past ATS, you know, that was interesting. So after this, right, this is my most recent resume that I used to apply to Loblaws and Ticketmaster. You know, like after reviewing a bunch of resumes, I learned some tricks. So for example, like, you know, like simple underlining. And personally, I find this very good. Like it really draws your eyes to the keywords. You know, I have all my keywords on the side, but I also have my keywords within my descriptions, right? So it really draws your eyes to like where you want them to go. And I selectively underline words. There are words here that I could have underline, like Google Play or App Store or PayPal, but I didn't because it wasn't necessary for that job. I underlined stuff that was important, like Jira. Like I knew they used Jira, and like Mern, because you know React and Node, like testing stuff like Jest, JUnit, Selenium. So you know when you repeatedly tailor your resume, like this is like something you can fine tune. Like tailoring doesn't take a lot of effort, you know, or else we would be all like or else it would be too inefficient. You know, you got to maximize your time. And as you can see, like there used to be a bunch of sentences down here. They're gone. You know, I moved the languages over here. You know, it doesn't, I don't even think anybody cares, but I just left it there, you know. And I think also having one-page resume helps you be very concise about what you want to show them. It's like every line is valuable, you know, like you don't, having too much fluff is actually a bad thing. Like this one, I in hindsight, I think a lot of this was like redundant and fluff, like just doesn't contribute value to your resume. Yeah. And now I will talk a little bit about like the interview process that I've seen and what to expect at interviews, right? So for small companies, like, so I've really only worked at small companies for real jobs besides co-op. So I know that, you know, usually for small companies, they usually only they have limited resources. They don't have an HR department. So it's usually a dev, like it's really their team lead coming to interview you on like all your technical and behavioral stuff together. And, you know, they would just conduct a 30-minute technical interview, and that usually is it. So usually anything bigger than a small startup, they would get an automated coding test first. And then they would have a recruiter who screens you with 10 minutes, who asks you about salary requirements and your availability. And then the recruiter will also schedule you for the actual technical interview. And then when you're onto technical interviews, it's usually like there's a session for coding and algorithms on like more medium-sized interview intensity interviews. And then in the end, they'll ask you like a technical / behavioral interview. So this is like a very common trend I've seen where if you were to go to somewhere like Amazon, right, they would have this like heavy intensity interview where you go to a test, you go to a screening, they ask you like coding algorithm question, and they have a behavioral interview. A lot more companies I feel like are starting to merge those together, and they will have their team lead come talk to you, and then they will see if they like you. It's basically the same as the small companies, but they'll just with a extra coding algorithm session. And yeah, they'll just ask you more domain specific questions and talk to you. And you get, usually being good at small talk really helps in these sessions. Yeah. So now let's talk about like what you need to do when you're at an interview. Like I have 3 C's. This is the 3C principle that I follow when I go to interviews, right? Because it's competence, confidence, and connection. So first is I'll talk about competence. This is self-explanatory. So this is the baseline. Like you need to show that you're able to do the job. And how you do that is obviously practice, right? So you should like maybe have some personal projects that helps you just helps you learn some new skills, right? Like I see a lot of junior positions only ask for bachelor's and data structure and algorithms, and they'll teach you. But that's usually bigger companies. Like a lot of smaller companies and medium-sized companies would rather have you hit the ground running because they would like to have less time to train you. So, if you're pre-trained, obviously that's a bonus for them, right? So, also you gotta really practice being able to verbally explain your code or algorithm. And like one too many times have I had people in interviews just going, and then they start rambling. And when you ramble, it's not concise and it's very hard to follow. So usually I just block it out, right? And you should also understand where your strengths are at. And if you're confident enough, you should be able to move the interview conversation by yourself, right? And also when you get to a question that you don't know, just ask for clarification. Like it might just be that they're using language you don't understand. And just don't be afraid to try to answer, because this is not, unlike the automated coding interview, the interviewer is human and you're not playing a trivia game. So they will try to help you answer. They will try to nudge you in this direction, right? And for myself, I also have a 3-second rule. So if I don't know the answer to a question, I would just say I don't know. Like if I can't like even have like the grasp of an answer in 3 seconds. Obviously, this doesn't apply to like deep thinking questions where it takes more time to think. Like you need, and I think this is a very important rule for like multitude of reasons. Like first, when you say I don't know, it shows confidence, right? Like where your strengths are at. Second, when you're in an interview, you have a limited amount of time to show the interviewer who you are and what your strength is. And every second you're sitting there thinking about an answer to a question you don't know is the second you're wasting where you can use to sell yourself. So don't let yourself get into your own head, like this pig over here, and stress them and spiral into like a bad and fate. Also, you have to, in interview, you should be humble. Again, this goes back to knowing where your strengths are at, right? Like very frequently, I ask people, like, please rate your skills in React from 1 to 10. And they tell me they're an 8. And okay. And I start off with the hard questions that they can't answer, right? It will look very bad, right? It looks very bad if you rate yourself an 8 and you can't answer that. And then I change to easier questions they still can't answer. It makes it look very bad. So you should be a little bit humble. And then, like, again, your interviewer is trying to gauge where your skills are at. They're not trying to trick you, right? And then the next C is for confidence. Like, confidence is a very broad word. It encompasses many things. Like, first you have to, it's about personal confidence. Again, you have to practice. You can't just wing it. It just doesn't work like that, right? Also, in interviews, you should also show passion. You show what you like, what you do. When a company is hiring you, not only are they, paying for your current skills, they're also technically investing in you. So they would like to see personal growth, right? So I love this one. So I have a good story to tell. So sometimes, interviewers are actually, in fact, just as nervous as you are sitting there in a chair. So especially true for first or second round, like junior developer interviews, where they send out the more quote unquote intermediate developers who have 1 or 2 years of experience, but doesn't really have experience interviewing people. So they could be just as nervous as you are. So you get bonus points if you make them feel uncomfortable. Anyways, so story time. I have a very good story. So when I went to interview for Hoop, so like I told you before, Hoop did a presentation at Seneca College about the company. So to impress them, I just wrote down their names. It wasn't even that hard. So I wrote down their names. So when I walked in the interview room, I went to shake the interviewer's hand. So, and then the interviewer's name is Maru, by the way. So I looked at her and I said, "Hi, Maru, nice to see you again." And then she looked at me, shook my hand, and said, "Hi, my name is Maru." They're also human and they can be nervous too. Being interviewer is also actually very exhausting because you have to keep the conversation going, and then you also have stuff to do, right? And again, like, to boost your personal confidence, you have to remember that interviewers are not being intentionally difficult. They're there to gauge your skill level. Like, if you're afraid of saying "I don't know," because saying "I don't know," they'll fail you. It doesn't work like that. If you're saying "I don't know" too many times, then it just means you're not good for the job, right? And also, this one is a little bit harder to relate now, but you'll understand when you get some experience, is that whenever you go to interviews, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. Like, because companies want talent, so they also need to put their best foot forward. Also, like, you can probably get bonus points doing an interview if you can just pick up the conversation. Because interviews, like I said, they're exhausting, and especially, developers, we don't, not only do we work, and then we have to, schedule, we have so much work to do, and then we still have to go interview this guy. Like, sometimes we get tired, at the end of the day, if you can pick up the conversation, it makes them feel better. If they like you more, they're more likely to hire you, and I'll talk more about that in the next slide. And also just smile, it helps. And I think this is one of the more non-obvious C's that they don't teach you in school. It's called connection. So connections is not something you can practice from mock interviews. Most of the time, your interviewers will be on your team. And before going to interviews, you should do some research or reconnaissance. So you should go look at, go try to investigate who is interviewing you, and see what you can talk about, whether it was technology wise, or you can even have like casual chats, like just like small talk, you know, like talk about like skydiving or something. You know, it's about building a connection, you know, like because likability is a very important factor when it comes to hiring, especially at like more medium to small size companies, because the workplace is a lot more interpersonal compared to more like corporate places, right? And also like be relatable, you know, just have good small talk, like make conversation when like the conversation gets really awkward, and then you can chat about common problems. Just like, for example, you know, when you have classmates, you know, you talk to your classmates and you talk to them about, oh my God, this professor is so bad. His marks, the way he marks is so bad, you know, and then you guys can bond because again, they're human too. And they're in some ways your peers, right? They don't have there really isn't a power imbalance, right? And then you should just show them who you are, and if you're fun to work with, that also gets you bonus points, like again, likability, right? And then obviously in interviews you should also give team play example, because developers will always work in teams, you know, it's a lot more interpersonal. Again, smile. So now I'm gonna tell you about my latest experience applying to Loblaws. I applied to Loblaws because I already had a polished resume from Ticketmaster. So I was like, oh, might as well. Let's go apply and see what I get. Yeah. So like before you apply, you know, you gotta apply and go into interviews. You gotta go look at a job posting. And you gotta find some like keywords or key areas. Like before you go into the interview, you look at a job posting. And they're like, React, TypeScript, Node.js. How do you study? How do I study? I just literally go to Google and go React interview questions, Node.js interview questions. I just brush up on them. You know, it takes practice. You know, if you fail the first time, don't be afraid to try again within a company. Yeah. And then next, you know, this is like, again, this is examples from my most recent interview at Loblaws. So, you know, I would go look at who's interviewing me, right? Applying the examples we were talking about earlier, where, you know, you got to build a connection when you're in an interview. So, you know, I covered up their names, but as I see their names here, and then I'm gonna go look them up on LinkedIn, right? I see them. I see that they have nice mugshots. So for this particular interview, I had a starting strategy. I know you guys may think this sounds cheesy, but I started off by complimenting them on their smiles on LinkedIn. Like, look at their smiles. You know, they look like happy. They're happy people. They're like, these are beautiful smiles, right? It's kind of like, you know, you walk on the street and someone walks by and tell you how you have nice shoes. You know, it makes their day, right? Especially when you're like sometimes like very busy as a developer, you know, makes your day. Anyway, so obviously, you know, I open up their LinkedIn. The first first things I noticed are stuff like, you know, Halifax, Nova Scotia. Like my parents lived a little bit in Halifax. I could talk to him about Halifax a little bit, and which I did. And like this is probably the most successful interview I've ever had, because the whole interview we were just smiling, we were chatting. You know, there's no like there wasn't really an awkward moment. Obviously I was able to answer most of the technical questions. Like, of course, and I did need to ask for clarification. And I did have to say, I don't know, to one or two questions, but it doesn't matter because, you know, I maximize my time on all the other, my areas where I'm strong, which is React. You know, and I had a good chat with them about tech problems, which is like, you know, building connection. And, you know, the other thing about confidence in interview is that you can actually control what interview goes. So for example, so when they got to React questions, so I am a React developer, so I'm very confident in my React skills because I love React. Like my license plate is literally React JSX. But anyways, so I had them throw me the hardest question they could at React, and I kind of answered it. It was a half answer, and then I asked them, right, can I give them an interview question instead? And then I gave them the question. They couldn't answer it, you know. See, like this is something you can do if you're good enough, right? Like they couldn't answer it, and then I told them answer, and we had a chat about the answer. Yeah, and like this was my most successful interview because they, like an hour after the interview, they just sent me an offer for $95,000. But obviously I knew Ticketmaster was worth more money, so I just declined. But anyways, so, right. So, and I think another area that I think people usually underutilize is like near the end of interview where they ask you questions. They would ask you like, do you have any questions for us? Right. You know, a lot of people just ask one or two questions, or they don't use the whole time they have. But this is also time you can use to sell yourself if you feel like you're good for the job, right? Like there's so many ways you can sell yourself. For example, right, you can build more connections. You can show more competence by talking about like challenges, right? Like what is the architecture challenge that you guys encounter? And you know, that shows them what areas you're good at, right? You can also show that you have initiatives or you like your interests, you know, or like your interest in growth, and you just ask them, do you have any programs that help people improve themselves? Or like, for example, do you have like tuition reimbursement, etc. Or just you need to use up the whole time. Obviously you got to prepare these questions going in, right? And then there's also like more connection questions, like just for example at Ticketmaster, I just ask them like how, like they have a perk at Ticketmaster where they have 4 free concert tickets a year. So I just asked them like, how have you used your company tickets 4 free tickets a year? And then they told me they got like nice seats to Beyonce's or something. And then we had a good chat about it for like 5-10 minutes. You know, it having chats, it really builds connection, right? And it, you know, it really shows, like when you ask questions, it also really shows your interest in the job. But you know, yeah. So like, okay, now it's like the end of the interview. You've done all your interviews. They'd be like, oh, well, give you a reply soon. You know, you think it's over? It's not over. You know, obviously this one is from Loblaws. You should, like, I know this is cheesy, and you guys probably hear this a lot. You should send them a thank you email or something after the interview. I think it's good, and I think it works because it really does give you a leg up, right? Like this one, obviously I was gonna send them an email after, but they sent me an offer like an hour after, so I didn't have the time to write up the email, but I had to decline. So like interviews are not just like a platform to find a job, right? It's also, for me, it's also a platform to network because you get to chat with interesting people. So, you know, I told them like, sorry, I have to work at Ticketmaster. I have a offer from Ticketmaster, so I'm just gonna go work with my friend. I'm like, oh, okay, nice to meet you. If things change down the road, looking for another move, let us know. See, now I have another option open for the future. Whether or not this will materialize, I don't know. Like maybe they wouldn't work at Loblaws in a year. I don't know, right? But you know, it keeps your options open, and it really just sells you as a dev, sells you as a person. Yeah. So this has been my my experience so far as a dev. we're at 50 minutes, so it's getting a bit long. Again, all the topics deserve like a longer, a more in-depth dive. If anyone have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or WeChat. I know it's a bit awkward because I don't have links to that right now. Probably should drop it in chat sometime. I also recommend watching Joseph's recording on the YouTube channel because I used that as like a reference point for my presentation. And it's very relatable. And what he talks, especially that section where he talks about expectations about your first job, right? Like obviously everyone wants to be able to go into like Amazon or like Microsoft out of the gate, but it's very hard. And when you don't make it, it kind of hurts your self-confidence. So, I think adjusting that, you really need to adjust your expectation, especially for your first job. And you need to just, I think, the first year is always hard, right? So, yeah. Thank you.
好的，非常感谢陈真老哥给咱们带来非常精彩的一个英文的经验分享。然后他提到那个 Joseph Motorola 那个的话，是我们上次组织的一个邀请的，应该是摩托罗拉多伦多本部的一个咱们群里面的老哥 Joseph 做的一个分享，也是关于找工作的，然后也是把它上传到了 YouTube channel， 大家可以去那个看一下。刚刚听了陈真老哥的分享，其实我觉得非常有收获。无论他提到在找工作的时候，找第一份工作 side project 重要性，以及在找了工作之后要更加积极的去 mentor 别人。如果你有 mentor 别人的机会的话，因为把自己的知识讲给别人听，也是自己提升能力一个过程。同时的话，如果有机会和 client 打交道的话，那么作为咱们 IT 的一个从业者的话，不光只是在自己技术上要做到深入，而且我们要去拓宽自己的一个横向的能力。因为现在不是经常说 T shape 人才嘛 ，T 型人才就是说一专多能。那么在 IT programming 方面，你做到足够的专，那么在横向的一些能力，比如 communication、mentor 别人或者 client 打交道，那么这样的话能够让大家未来的职业发展的路走得更好。然后其次的话，在陈真老哥的分享当中，我觉得有一个非常重要的一点，他提到就是说，在投简历的时候，大家一定要有一个 A/B 测试的一个思想，因为他们经常做网站的时候就会有 A/B 测试嘛，不同的网站，一个是网站page A， 一个 page B， 去看哪个网站上去了之后，用户有更多转化率，或者用户更多的停留时间。那么咱们写简历也是一样，你可以准备不同版本的或者的简历，或者不同的措辞、不同模板的简历，看哪一个简历同样的方式投出去之后能得到更多的反馈或者面试机会，这个话我觉得也是非常值得参考的一点。因为很多同学在找工作的时候，老师就一个简历投到底，有问题了之后，因为身边没有人给他看嘛，没人给他把关，也不知道是什么原因。然后陈真老哥，我这边收到一些朋友提到的一些问题，他们想向你请教，你可以用英文，也可以用中文回答。然后有一个朋友他在问，他的经历和你比较相像，他不是读那个 IT 专业的，最近的话才转专业，然后现在在 Snackan 那边读 diploma， 就是说之前不是 IT 专业的本科，他就想知道后面他在找工作了，那么现在能做些什么，能够为他后面更能够增加竞争力。其实我觉得朋友的问题其实有代表性，就很多同学现在在校，他们也知道工作好找，竞争非常大，当然不清楚就是现在他们应该做点什么，能够为后面找工作增加一个竞争力。
Yeah, so I think one thing I really forgot to mention is that you should find a technology you like and stick with it to begin with. For example, for me, it was React, like the MERN stack. You could pick like embedded or like testing if that's what you're interested in, because you'll be stuck with it for at least 4 or 5 years. Because like trying to change technology frameworks, there's not a lot of jobs that will let you do that. You need to have jobs that's flexible. But with that being said, obviously you have to go do side projects. Like that is the only thing you can do. And you should, it's kind of like being a developer is also like being an artist. You need to build a portfolio. I think one thing I really wanted to do in school, but I never achieved, was building my own website, right? Because I'm a web dev, so I'm a web like application developer. Build a lot of stuff is on web now. I think learning React is very good. So build your own portfolio, build your own website, do your own personal projects, or else you would have nothing to put on your resume, right? Yeah.
好的，谢谢老哥。对，这个还是说到 side project 和 portfolio 的一个重要性，因为找工作说白了还是说，怎么样在同龄人里面做到出类拔萃？那么只是满足于学校那点课程肯定是不够的，还是要多去做一些 side project。还有一个问题，有朋友在问，这个朋友的话，他可能没有在加拿大，他是在国内或者说其他国家。他说现在的话，加拿大移民政策一下变得非常的好。那么对于在其他国家或者说中国已经有一些工作经验的人想来加拿大这边找工作、求职、移民，那么他们本身有工作经验，但是没有 local experience，那么你有没有一些找工作或者该怎么去准备的建议给他们
？I know that a lot of people on LinkedIn are pushing for like more equal like non-racial hiring. Like people, a lot of people want Canadian experience, but I know that my current company, Atonics, is actually very open, and so do a lot of companies that work with Invest Ottawa. So I recommend you look them up on LinkedIn. I know they're very open to people who doesn't have any Canadian experience. That's as far as the advice I can give.
好的，谢谢陈晨老哥。我这个再补充一句哈，就是说，其他国家或者说国内的哥们儿想过来转战加拿大的话，有一点要注意一下，就是说一个技术站的不同哈，这个的话是很大的一个区别，一定要到 LinkedIn 或者刚才陈晨老哥前面有一个 slide 提到的那几个招聘网站，一定要去看，就是说加拿大这边它的一个技术站的要求，比如说拿国内的举例子，国内的话 Web Developing 大多是使用 Java， 这边基本上是 React。然后国内有一些前端开发用的是 Vue，这边基本上不用，所以说这个的话，大家一定要注意，就是说两个国家的技术站不一样，如果贸然过来发现你之前掌握的经验和技术完全都不一样的话，那就完全不好。然后因为时间关系，我们再解答那个最后一个问题哈。陈老哥有一个朋友他在问，他说要找工作的话，他现在的时间该怎么来分配？是把时间花到做 side project， 还是花到去把自己的一些基础知识复习一下，还是说压到算法上面？所以他现在的话就不清楚时间怎么去分配，你能不能给他一些建议，或者说能不能给优先级，先准备哪个，后准备哪个？
I love this question. So it depends. Well, the first thing you should do is you go on job site and look at junior positions, right? Like you have to decide what you want to do first, like between data algorithms or doing a side project. Side projects are always good, but when you study algorithms, like there's a lot of jobs that does not require like a certain framework to know sorry, let me try again. There are certain jobs that doesn't require you to know certain frameworks like React or Angular, like the assumptions that they will teach you. Obviously, project always give a leg up, right? So I think, it's always good to also know a skill, but I think I would prioritize having projects, and then, well, first I would build a resume first, and I would browse. Like I would spend like 1/10 of my time on that because it shouldn't take too long because there's only so many jobs you can look at, and then I would just spend the rest of my time working on polishing my personal project. And algorithms is like depends on what jobs you're looking at. There are jobs that just tells you like you need to know algorithms and you should study that. And obviously whatever job you do, it should be reflected in your personal projects. Like you want to be a web dev and do more React. You want to do algorithms, depending on what algorithm, right? Like if you're doing machine learning, you also need to do a machine learning personal project. Like there's no conflict between studying algorithms, brushing up on algorithms, and doing personal projects. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, good question.
好的，好的，非常感谢池仁老哥给咱们今天带来的一个分享。他为了把这个分享做好，其实在过去的1周的时间内，他花了很多时间去准备，并且是梳理他自己工作这么长时间的一个职业经验，以及他毕业找工作的一些体会。如果你在后面遇到找工作的问题，或者说刚毕业不知道怎么来找这个工作，或者说你不知道简历该怎么去写，拿到面试这方面不清楚，或者说希望找人来做 mock interview 的话，咱们 IT 类推群和群里面的很多大牛本地的老哥，包括今天做分享的陈真老哥，有给大家提供相应的一些面试辅导、模拟面试或者简历的一个 review， 以及带着大家做项目方面的一些服务。如果大家感兴趣的话，可以联系咱们。然后在这里的话，我们再次感谢陈真老哥给咱们带来的一个分享，也希望大家在今后找工作的路上一切顺利，好吧？谢谢大家，大家晚安，感谢陈真老哥，大家晚安，拜拜，拜拜，
拜拜。